Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Faerie, Fable, Librarians. I'm Simona.
I'm Katie.
And we have a special guest.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. I'm Paul.
Yes, Paul works in the Youth Services Department. He's very good. He's awesome. So today we're going to be talking about Cinder, which is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. And it was also a book selected for the Battle of the Books this year, right, Paul?
We actually did it for the Battle of the Books 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
And I actually have to preface that it was actually our book group. We did it for our middle school book group. And this was during a time when the library was doing outdoor programming. Mm-hmm. So we were actually doing trivia outside in the garden. It was a lot of fun.
Very nice.
Yeah. So Cinder, for those who are not familiar, is a retelling of the classic Cinderella story. So it takes place in a futuristic city known as New Beijing. And Cinder, who's the titular character, is a cyborg, and she lives in the capital of New Beijing. And she works as a mechanic, and she can do almost anything. She's extremely talented and gifted. And her life sort of gets turned upside down when she meets Prince Kaido, or Kai. And he acts sort of fixed his personal android, and things sort of pick up from there in terms of storyline and what happens to her. And just as an FYI, there will be spoilers.
Yes, this is a spoiler alert now, so if you haven't read the book, I suggest that you stop watching and read the book before you watch this podcast.
Yeah, so in addition to sort of what we're going to be doing is sort of like a compare with the original Cinderella story. And when we mean original, we're going to be mostly referring to the one that most people, at least in this country and in Europe, will be familiar with. So the Western story of Cinderella. There are, of course, many versions of this tale globally. And we also do have some Cinderella retellings from different cultures in our fiction juvenile collection. So feel free to stop in and take a look at that. There's some great selections there.
So I started reading Cinder. I have to confess that I didn't find it that all entertaining. And it could just be because it was a different writing style than what I've been reading, which is Sarah J. Maas's book. Which,
shout out!
Yes, which I love her writing style. I love her world building, her character development, and she always seems to just hook me in and within the first few pages. So I tried to give this book a shot. Unfortunately for me, it was a slog to go through, and I just kind of stopped reading it. And I had already guessed that Cinder was the long lost princess from Luna, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from Luna. So really what I looked at was mostly the opera version of Cinderella by Rossini. And then I was also looking at the ballet that was created and written by a Russian composer, which unfortunately I can't remember his name. Two very completely different mediums, but told the same story, and it was interesting to watch those play out in ballet form and opera form.
It's Sergei Prokofiev.
Sergei Prokofiev? Yeah. Okay, that was the composer of the ballet.
Thank you, Producer Lou.
Yes, thank you, Lou. And what I found interesting was that because we had initially in December, we were going to do something on the Nutcracker, so I was looking at Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker, and in the Russian ballet of the Nutcracker, the tempo was slower than what I'm used to listening to with the New York City ballet. And I found that the tempo in Cinderella was much faster. And I don't know if that's because I wasn't predisposed to listening to a much more upbeat version like in the Nutcracker, but I definitely found this tempo to be a lot faster. And what I also found interesting was that in some productions, they had male ballet dancers playing the parts of the stepmother and the stepsister, so it made those parts more comical than in Disney's version of Cinderella, with the stepsisters being dumb. for lack of a better term, and ditzy. While the stepmother is very much cunning in that movie.
Yeah.
But that's, and Rossini's opera is beautiful. I highly recommend anyone seeing it. It's anyone who's not that interested in opera, I think would enjoy this. And you can find it on YouTube, and different variations of it. So I was like watching productions from from as late as, well, I should say from as early as 1981 to a more recent production that was done in I'm assuming Italy, that was posted on YouTube last year, produced last year through this opera streaming on YouTube. So it's, yes, highly recommend.
Well, I don't want you to feel bad about not getting into Cinder on your first try, because right over here is, I see a mug, and maybe if we can turn this mug, that's the Harry Potter mug. And believe it or not, when I first read Harry Potter, I couldn't get through it.
Really?
I was reading it, I was looking at it, and I said,
Cancel the podcast.
I said, oh, you know, this book, what's, come on. And I have to say, I think it's a time and a place
Yeah.
for books, because when I came back to it later,
Mm-hmm.
back when I was studying for a librarian, it was a whole different outlook
Right.
as when I had looked at it when I was quite a bit, younger
Yeah.
before school. So, but I really enjoyed, Cinder for me, because we were going to do it for the book group. It was something that kind of was an extra motivation for me to read it, and I know we had actually gotten the recommendation for the book group from Simona, which I'm very thankful for. And if you do want, we were talking about some of the Cinderellas. If you really want to get into Cinderella very, very quickly, you could read this one, the Charles Perrault.
Oh, yes.
And I also have the Art Deco Cinderella, if you want to see Cinderella as a flapper.
Oh,
from the
could
1920s.
we see some of the pictures?
Sure.
This could be like a story time as well.
I love the illustrated books of Cinderella. Oh, it's so
I'll
pretty.
let you
that
take
is-
a look.
Oh, that's very nice. Oh.
Oh, wow.
We actually have a Cinderella, a few picture books in the youth services area of the library.
I have to show this.
Okay.
It's the stepmother character, and I'm assuming the father character. It's just so nice. Like, I love this. This is definitely worth checking out. Oh, this is so nice. I may actually read this
Okay.
because it looks really nice.
So let me ask you guys something.
I'm just
Sure.
gonna hand that back to you.
If the shoe's a perfect fit, how does it fall off?
Well, if you've ever ran or walked really fast in high-heeled
I
shoes,
can't say I have.
okay, if it's, regardless if it's a perfect fit, if you're not wearing any type of socks or stockings and your feet sweat, as they are wont to do, your shoe it'll slip right off.
And in all fairness, she had to get that shoe pretty quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting because, and I know Lou is also, teasing us a bit because producer Lou loves to do that.
Yes.
So in the Cinder story, in Cinder's case, because she is a cyborg, she has cyborg parts, and you learn why she has cyborg parts. It's one of the things that's revealed a little later in the story. One of her feet, because her stepmother, who had to take her in after the death of her father, basically punishes her by removing her well-fitted foot and forcing her to wear a much older one, which is like smaller for her. So eventually it's so loose that as she's running, it just falls right off her, and that's what's left behind. So it's an additional mortification because in this world, cyborgs have a stigma against them. They're not fully trusted. So Cinder has that stigma against her, so her foot is the one left behind.
Another question.
Yes.
In what world are cyborgs trusted?
Well,
Because I feel like they're
that's
not
true.
trusted in any world. Like, I wouldn't trust a cyborg.
Well, I think that's a good theme you just mentioned, because discrimination is something that actually runs throughout the book.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
definitely.
true.
Not only is she cyborg, but we find out she's lunar.
Yes.
We also find out Dr. Erland, who is
Yeah.
the one who's working with her.
It was like her fairy godmother character, I would say.
Yeah, and just watching the operas too, it has a very different take on the leaving of the glass slippers. Cinderella in the opera doesn't leave behind any shoes. She gives a bracelet to the prince who's in disguise as a squire, and the squire is disguised as the prince. So it's a much more, I don't want to say realistic, but if it was based in reality, you would believe it. Rather than losing a shoe, she gives him a bracelet and essentially says, if you look for me and you see the bracelet and you get to know me and you like me, then, reveal yourself with its twin. And
I think also, like, with the original story and the Disney film, which is a classic and is one of my favorites, it's a beautiful film.
yes,
The whole sort of theme around Cinderella is that she's this young woman who has gone from the happiest of circumstances. She's loved by her father who's widowed remarries, so this new woman with her daughters, I'm not sure how many, sometimes that can vary, moves into the home. Once the father dies, her circumstances are greatly reduced, where she's forced to be a servant in her own household essentially.
yeah,
But through it all, Cinderella, and even in the fairy tale, never loses her sense of hope. And what I loved about the fairy tale, and I think that's the Perrault version, is
you're right.
yeah, there is also an element of divine assistance, because like in one case her stepmother says, okay, you'll be able to do this, but clean out, like sort the lentils from like the soot and the ashes in the fireplace. And Cinderella is so dejected, but essentially divine aid in the form of birds, I believe it's birds?
Yeah, it was birds.
They come and they sort out the lentils from the soot. So in a way, what I believe the story was saying, that like even in your darkest of times, have hope, and your prayers, you will be helped. So in the story, she loses that slipper. So the slipper is essentially the only thing that the prince has to go on as to who she is. Like he's danced with her, it's love at first sight. They've obviously never exchanged names. There were no cell phones. So he has no clue who this woman is. And in the tale, and this is something that Disney rightfully omitted because they wanted it to be very child-friendly, one stepsister, in order to fit into the shoe, cuts off her toes.
Yep.
So she puts her foot in there, and as the prince is about to take her away, there's a crow that basically goes, caw, caw, and it's like, the blood, look at the blood. And the prince sees the trail of blood, and he realizes, okay, she's not the one. The other sister goes, okay, the mother says, cut off your heels. You don't need to walk anyway.
Yeah.
You'll be taken care of. She cuts off her heels, fits into the shoe, but likewise, divine assistance, the crow, is he tells the prince, it's an imposter, look at the blood.
Yeah.
So that's how the prince realizes, okay, these are not the women I'm looking for. And eventually Cinderella puts her feet in there, and lo and behold, she's the one that he's been looking for. And in the play, in the tale, an added gruesome feature is that the sister's eyes get plucked out
By the
crow.
Yeah.
And they're blinded.
Yeah.
And I think in a Chinese version, I think the stepmother and stepsisters, they're killed by a cave-in, so their home collapses, and that's how they're killed after.
Yeah.
Her name's not Cinderella. I can't remember what her name actually is.
So I got a question about, if we take it on a side note, what about the character herself, her personality and the type of person that Cinder was in the Marissa Meyer book versus the Cinder in the Charles Perrault book?
So I would find that Cinder in Meyer's book is very much assured of herself. She very much knows who she is, knows the stigma against cyborg. She has no delusion, and is very much okay and very much comfortable and very happy with who she is. And it's just circumstances being what they are in New Jabing and the Eastern Commonwealth, and in some parts of Europe you have this plague that's been spreading out that we later find out comes from Luna. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason it was deemed that cyborgs who had survived the plague are the ones that then should give their lives in order to try and find a cure. So I mean, regardless of everything that she has to deal with on a more stigma and stereotypical, I guess if stereotypical is the right word we want to use, she's very much okay with being who she is. If not, she has some doubts, like any human being would have, I think.
And I think that's what actually, when Cinder was in the market. So Cinder's she's a mechanic. She works in New Beijing, and when Prince Kai approaches her, he says, "I'm looking for the mechanic. You're the mechanic." So it seems like he's questioning. It's not what he was expecting.
Right, right.
So,
well, and I'm sorry. And I mean, and initially, and when he tells her, he says, "Well, when I was told, I was expecting an old man, not a young woman." So.
And so she doesn't. Cinder doesn't necessarily stay at home. She's very much like in the original story. Cinderella is kind of doing the cooking and the cleaning. In this book, she's out in the marketplace, and it's I think a little bit of a different mindset maybe that she has.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because you also have to think about when the original fairy tale was written. It was written in a time where women were very much mothers, wives. You took care of the home, and there was a lot of pride and honor in being able to run a home and, do it in a way that was orderly and you were trained to do that. Whereas for if the story was told in that way, I don't think a lot of people would ring true to a lot of people. So, and for Meyer to set it where Cinder is the mechanic, she's very good at what she does, she's very assured of herself, it would resonate a lot more with women of our generation rather than in, say, the 19th or 18th centuries was when the original fairy tale had been written.
Yeah, and another thing, that the original fairy tale, like Perrault was very much writing for a certain class of woman.
Absolutely.
Because if you were poor or working class, emphasis on working, you were out of the home. In some cases, maybe not always.
Right.
But,
Well, I mean, in back when Perrault was writing the original fairy tale, and I believe it was the late 18th century, so 1700s, there was no such thing as a working middle class. You were either a farmer or a commoner, or I should say peasant even. You were either a farmer working out in the countries or a merchant, or you were of high social standing. And so he was definitely, to go onto your point, Simona, he was very much writing for the wealthy social, hierarchy of France of the time.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these tales, bringing back the tales, they were to entertain, but at the same time they were sort of designed to teach some kind of lesson.
Yeah.
So going back with Cinderella, it's that patience, kindness is rewarded. Cruelty, duplicity is also rewarded, but not in the good sense, because in the end the stepsisters, their eyes were plucked out because they tried to deceive the prince and they were cruel. In this story, Cinder, especially with her they're not really her stepsisters. They're the stepsister-like characters, but they're not really.
She was adopted into the family. Cinder was adopted into the family, which is another distinction.
Yeah.
But that isn't in any of the other retelling tales of Cinderella.
So we'll call her the sisters though. So one of her sisters, there's Peony and Pearl. So she has a very close relationship with Peony, who is the younger sister. They're very close. They love one another. So that was another difference, because usually with the stepsisters in the original tales, there's an antagonism. Yeah. There really is no love between the Cinderella character and her stepsister or stepsisters.
And that could possibly have thrown me off too, reading the story, because I'm too used to that. I mean, one of my favorite adaptations of Cinderella is Ever After.
Oh, yes.
With Drew Barrymore.
Which we have in the system, by the way.
It's a great movie. There is so much animosity between the oldest stepsister, Marguerite, and the Baroness, and Danielle, the Cinderella character, that finally, towards the end of the movie, Danielle punches Marguerite square in the face. after saying that her mom was dead and thus
Yeah.
and it's a whole big thing, but so I don't know. It's an aspect of the story that I think is just ingrained in my knowing of the story, that it kind of like put me off a little bit.
Well, what's the name? There's Marguerite and what's the
Jacqueline.
other? Jacqueline. In that case, Jacqueline is almost like Peony. Like Jacqueline.
That's very true.
In the Ever After story,
But-
since it's another version of Cinderella, she is the kind of, she doesn't necessarily try to prevent anything that happens to
Right.
Danielle. She's sort of complicit, to
Yeah.
be perfectly honest. She doesn't go out of her way to be cruel, but she very much doesn't say, you know, Mom, this isn't what we
Right.
should be doing, you know,
Right.
so.
Right.
So, in Cinder, who's your favorite character?
In Cinder, who's my favorite character? Well, it's Cinder.
Cinder?
Cinder is my favorite character, even though I can't, I don't know. I'll try and give this book another shot, but I don't.
What I will say about the Lunar Chronicles, though, is honestly, when I first read this series, because this series I think was first published in 2012. It's a not fairly old, but it's an older series. These are like the reworked covers, which I really love.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, and we can show. I mean, just-
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
Really.
they're so well done.
Yeah.
This is
Um,
other ones from the series.
Oh yeah, so Stars Above, and that's another. Yep.
Now, Simona, my understanding is
Yeah.
that the other books in the series, some of them also have fairy tale.
Yeah,
titles.
so essentially the other books in the series, and I think that's honestly like of the series, the second one, Scarlet, who focuses. This takes place in France. She is the Little Red Riding Hood character, but there's a twist on her story. So what I love is that Marissa keeps elements of the original tale. So in Cinder, it's the cyborg foot that comes loose and is left on the stairs.
Okay.
In Scarlet, she wears a red hoodie. She works on a farm. The wolf character is also it's a very different take on the wolf.
Yeah, 'cause is he Luna?
Yes.
Yeah.
With Cress, and Cress is probably one of also my favorites because of another character that it gets introduced into that story, is about Rapunzel. She's the Rapunzel character. But even her, she doesn't live in a tower, she's in a space station. So she's been in this space station all her life. Winter is the story of Snow White.
She's gonna get some long hair to get out of the space station, right?
Well, yeah, essentially her hair is so overgrown that also, it's so heavy that it also hinders her movement.
I have to laugh because I was just looking at a picture book, Cinderella, that we have in youth services, and it was the Intergalactic Cinderella.
Yeah.
And she goes to the gravity-free ball. So if you don't have much time, you can read that one.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of these tales, because I know, and we don't have like a release date, but I know that Disney is doing a live-action version of their Snow White. And one of the comments made, and I think the actress who was in
The actress who played Maria in West Side Story has been cast to play Snow White.
and I know that Peter Dinklage is his name?
Yes.
He had words to say about Disney doing this, because according to him, it's a retrograde story. And my point in bringing this up, I won't digress too much. He basically doesn't feel that these are the kinds of stories that need to be told. We don't need to retrograde. But what I find so interesting is that these stories are constantly being retold.
Yes.
So no matter how you change, and that tells me that essentially there is something about these tales that speaks to people globally. They're being retold, but there's a reason why they're always being retold, reimagined, but the essential elements are the same, so to speak.
Yeah.
So they have staying power, and I think there's a reason why they have staying power. So that was my point in bringing up the Snow White story, because Peter Dinklage didn't think it's something that should be made. And I know in the early 2000s or late 2000s, I can't remember now what the channel is called, but BuzzFeed. But they had a whole thing about denigrating the Disney princesses because they're outdated, and the tropes, and
Why does that make my eye twitch?
Because,
That makes
because,
my eye twitch.
because I think it's also almost a way of saying that in the modern era is when we became so enlightened and that no one wants to be a Disney princess. But in my opinion, and I won't speak for every little girl out there, there's a reason why Disney princesses are as popular as they are.
Uh-huh.
If there was, if there wasn't a market for these characters, Disney would have gone broke a long time ago. So that's how I'll end it there. So I'm off my soapbox now. So yeah, there's a universality to all of these stories. Cross-culturally, while there are differences, there still are similarities. Like if you take one Native American version, the rough-faced girl, and we have this
I
book.
love that book
Uh,
so much.
The Cinderella character, because she's called the rough-faced girl, so that's how I refer to her, but she is a Cinderella-esque character. She suffers horrific abuse at the hands of her stepmother. Like, she's forced to be into the fire, where she gets burned and scarred.
Those are stepsisters.
Yeah. And through it all, she remains kind. And eventually her kindness, her determination to not allow her, which is what Cinderella is about. Because she's essentially an abuse victim, but she strives and she knows that in the end, she will rise out of it. To not sound corny, she'll rise from the ashes and she'll have a better experience. And that's what happens. She is rewarded. She finds the love of her life. She gets married, lives off in a castle. The rough-faced girl finds her love and leaves her abusive home.
Yep.
And Cinder eventually does the same thing.
There's another really great retelling called Moscow. And it's based in the American South on this plantation owner who has actually 3 daughters, and 2 of them are really vain and exemplify what the stepsisters are, but they're actually her sisters. And then they have the youngest girl who, I can't remember if she's called Cinderella or not, is very kind, very gentle, and it's a very interesting story. I love the story. The art illustrations is beautiful. I wish I had remembered to bring it in so I could show all of you, but I forgot. But it's a great story, and my mom and I, when I was a kid, we would read it. She would read it to me constantly. So it's another really great story, Moscow.
Well, I don't think I got to say who my favorite character is.
Go ahead,
yes.
Paul.
Any guesses?
Is it Prince Kai?
Guess again?
Dr. Erland?
My favorite character is Aiko the android.
Oh, yes.
And I'll explain why. So, Aiko is Cinder's kind of personal assistant at the marketplace, and she is always happy. She's always in a good mood, and she's like kind of very encouraging for the characters, for Cinder, and Cinder, you can get to the ball, you can get to the ball, we can get you a dress, we can get you a dress.
Yeah, she's very
I'm
optimistic.
Like, go,
yeah.
Make it happen.
Yeah, I love that character. I love those characters too. And you kind of, it's a character that you see replicated in like Disney's Cinderella, where you have Jacques the Mouse and Gus and the birds and all the mice. They make her Cinderella's gown for her before her stepsisters tore it to shreds, so that she can go to the ball. And I mean, you've got other in Ever After you have Danielle's the kitchen servants who are there. I don't remember their names. Paulette and Louise. There we go. See, I remembered. And they're very optimistic. They want her to follow her dreams, essentially. And yes, I agree. Aiko is a great character.
I just thought of in Ever After, there's the scene in the marketplace.
Oh, God.
Where the prince is giving a tour and he's talking to Marguerite and Angelica Houston's characters in the back, trying to like get her daughter to marry the prince.
Fairness.
Yeah, and And there's a scene when he almost sees Danielle, but she throws a chicken in his
Yes,
face.
she's holding a chicken and she tosses
and
it.
pandemonium ensues.
Yes.
And she escapes, and the prince says, were there just the two of you? She goes, and the chicken, your highness. So that just reminded me of that. It's one of the funniest
Such a
scenes.
great line.
Yeah, the serving characters are so great because thinking about even their positions within the household,
Yeah.
they have very limited agency. But they still, which is also the point of Cinderella, because if you think about Cinderella, she has limited agency. Even
She does.
Cinder, she's technically owned by her stepmother.
Mm-hmm.
That's why her stepmother is able to essentially sell her off to do the lumitosis research. She has no agency whatsoever, because, ooh,
Hold on.
uh,
I have to cut across the cameras.
Technical
Turn the light back
difficulties.
on. Don't pick it up until I cross back over. All right.
Well, we'll cut this part out.
Hopefully, Joe might leave it in. Who knows?
I think it makes it
He
real.
might think it's funny.
Well, you actually just reminded me of another character that
Yeah.
was Dr. Erland. We didn't
Yeah.
really talk about him.
Yeah.
He's when Cinder is, despite her stepmother, being her guardian, her stepmother ultimately decides, okay, Cinder, you are going to be sent away for plague research.
Mm-hmm.
And, we can only guess at her reasoning for that. But Cinder goes to get this.
Cruel and vindictive, and blames
Paul
Cinder.
is being nice.
and blames Cinder for the death of her husband.
What would I go say? Dr. Erland does this, does blood samples on Cinder and does all this testing on her. But little do we know till towards the end of the story that Dr. Erland himself is a lunar.
Yeah.
And he's actually kind of in hiding himself. He doesn't even reveal to the prince who he really is.
Right.
Yeah, there are subtle hints though, like when he first meets Cinder, and Cinder's thinking, this man is nice. He doesn't want to hurt me, because that's one of the things about lunars, and what makes Earthlings, or they're probably not called Earthlings, but people in the Earth
Earthers?
mistrust lunars. Earthlings.
In the Commonwealth.
We're gonna. Is that lunars have the ability to manipulate thoughts and emotions. So essentially, Dr. Erland is doing the same thing to basically, because he needs Cinder to basically, cool your jets. I need to get stuff done. Don't worry about me. So there are subtle hints, which I noticed rereading it.
Well, she was coming at him with a wrench.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So he had
Do
to, yeah, so he had to basically act quickly. Yeah, he is a very interesting character because lunars are not allowed to even emigrate away from the moon. If lunars are found on Earth, they're supposed to immediately be sent back, which is part of the agreement that the Earth has with the lunar kingdom. And even the queen, who we haven't spoken about, Queen Levana, because she's a very interesting, she's almost like, and you realize when you go to the novel Winter, which is like the Snow White retelling.
I mean,
Her-
even just looking at how she acts, just through trying to force Kai to marry her, and in negotiations that you kind of get hints at in the middle of the book, and then come to find out that she is just as people think she is at the ball. It's like, this character is the evil queen. I mean, that's the sense I got. And I mean, even though I didn't really read stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's yeah.
I was
Not,
about to ask you, my next question was, could you explain the ending to me?
Yeah.
Because I didn't quite get the sequence of events.
So, I mean, because I read, I read her character piece on Wiki Fan about the character, and I read ahead when I was reading it, and I kind of spoiled it for me. So, my understanding in the end, Cinder is at the ball, she's dancing with Prince Kai, Levana, did I say her name? Levana comes to the ball to try and force Kai to marry her, or to have negotiations of whatever treaty she wants to unfold. And when she finds Cinder, because she's lunar, Levana's lunar, and Cinder, we come to find out, is also lunar. The connection is made that, but at least on Levana's end, that Cinder and her niece, Princess Celine, are one and the same.
Yes.
And all pandemonium breaks loose, and it's like her whole, I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining it, but it's like the way she's written, her whole personality and her demeanor resembled, like, for me, the vainness and vindictiveness of the evil queen from Snow White.
Exactly. And, like I said...
I hope I answered your question.
Spoilers. And
Yes.
spoilers also for the cast today. So yes, essentially Queen Levana in this story, I don't really know she doesn't serve a purpose in the traditional Cinderella story, but she very much is the evil queen for Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
And what you learn is that Queen Levana rules the kingdom of Lunar. She essentially usurped the throne, murdered the true king and queen, and
Who was Celine's
mother and father,
and Levana's sister.
Yes, and what she did was, the reason why Cinder is part cyborg is because she suffered tremendous burns to most of her body. She almost died, so a lot of parts had to be replaced.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's because Levana had set fire to the nursery where Cinder had been in as a baby, and Cinder was able to escape, but her nursemaid died in the flames.
Yeah. And Levana basically, Cinder is a threat, because first of all, Cinder can see past Levana's elaborately constructed illusion. She's not the fairest in the land. Mm-hmm. She's definitely not fair by any means. And Cinder can see that. So Levana, part of her thing is that I am perfect, I am beautiful, I am the epitome of what a queen should be, worship me and adore me. And for the most part, her subjects say, yes, you're beautiful, we adore you. But Cinder can see past that. So she's a double threat. She's the legitimate heir, and she could reveal to the Lunars, no, I'm still alive, and this is what happened to me. So in the end, the fact that Levana sees Cinder, she knows who she is. And Cinder was supposed to fly under the radar, as Dr. Erlin wanted her to, but she did a sort of poor job of doing that.
Yeah.
And she also was intending to reveal to Kai a major sort of reality that Lunar is building an army with the intent of invading Earth. So that was part of the intelligence that his robot had in it, but it had been intercepted. So that's essentially so basically Cinder's trying to reveal this, but unfortunately it's at the worst moment, because her stepmother comes in and says, she's a cyborg. So immediately it's like everything else goes out the window. It doesn't matter what she's telling anyone, she's a cyborg, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there was a very pivotal moment that, in my mind, at the very end of the story, where Cinder's at the ball with Prince Kai, and this is all happening all in a very fast sequence of events, and Queen Levana recognizes, like you said, who Cinder actually is, that she actually is Princess Celine, and Cinder goes to grab the guard's gun, and she pulls it out, and then she, I believe, puts it to her own head, and then that's the sequence where she uses like the bioelectric energy that is her lunar gift, and is able to. That's the part that I was a little bit, unsure of exactly what's going on at that point.
Oh. I don't remember.
It's a very
I didn't read
distinct
that.
paragraph or two in the end of the book, and long story short, she ends up surviving that shot, and I believe that has to do with her ability to manipulate the bioelectric energy or something that's.
It would make sense, because earlier in the book you tend to see that there's certain parts of her that have that. I don't know what I'm trying to.
I'm sorry, I know what this is. So she didn't intentionally put the gun to her head.
think it was Levana.
I think so, yeah, so.
Levana tried to manipulate her to put the gun to her head. Like Levana's gifts is the ability to make people think or do something that they wouldn't otherwise do.
Yeah, and ultimately, that's the way that Cinder kind of gets out of that situation.
Right.
She runs out of the room, total mess, and she gets imprisoned.
Yep.
Yes.
But Kai is kind of technically buying her a little bit of time. He's saying,
Exactly,
we're not gonna do anything too serious yet. We're just gonna hold her, and then we're gonna figure it out from here.
Right.
He's trying to buy her time, so
Yeah.
she's kind of just waiting in this.
Because it basically says she imagined what the gun would sound like. She imagined the blood. She imagined her brain shutting down, feeling nothing. And then it goes, bioelectrical manipulation detected, initializing resistance procedure in 3, 2. Her fingers slowly pull down on the trigger. So part of her cyborg is that, essentially she could overheat. So she has these sort of fail-safe things implemented in her system.
So it's like she can't blush, she can't sweat, because if her internal body gets too overheated, then she will automatically shut down.
So she has like these self-preservation programming, like programs programmed into her system. So I think that's another reason why she's able, because I think her brain is also telling her, you're being manipulated. You don't really want to shoot yourself in the head. And I think that is also what enables her to sort of resist that, and she fires in the air instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading the next book. I think Scarlet is the next one.
Yep.
They definitely get better. What I will say is when I first started reading this, I had a hard time getting through Cinder as well, the very first time I read it. Afterwards, the books get increasingly better. I would definitely say Scarlet is my favorite, but they do get very good.
And we do plan on talking about the other books in the Lunar Chronicles series, so I'll definitely give the other books a shot and go from there.
Yeah, because it's fun to see like what elements are kept, what elements are discarded, how they're changed. And another thing which I wanted to mention too was that the Lunar Chronicles will be adapted as an animated series. So Locksmith Animation will be working with Marissa Meyer to basically adapt her novels for television. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I think it's going to be streaming on Netflix. So that's definitely something where we can return and see.
Absolutely see.
And I think I like that they're making it into an animated version, because animation, you're kind of limited with people. Animation, you can go all out, so to speak. So I'm looking forward to see how they bring the world to life.
Absolutely.
So that should be fun.
Yes.
And I also wanted to mention, because we're all about promoting services, is that the Lunar Chronicles is available for download on Libby by Overdrive. So you can get all of the audiobooks, and I believe they also have ebooks. And of course, you can get the physical books through the Mid-Hudson Library System. So check that out.
Yes, please check that out. So, Paul, aside from Cinder, is there any other adaptation of Cinderella that you personally enjoy, either reading or watching?
Well, since I'm in the youth services area most of the day,
Yeah.
I tend to read youth service material. So, and I realized that if I read all the picture books, I can accomplish a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But it's like you had said earlier. I mean, there's so many different adaptations. There's like an Egyptian Cinderella.
Yeah.
There's all different ones, and I don't really know which is my favorite. I mean, I really like this one. I really did. I mean, just the concept of the futuristic, the cyborg, and the whole the interplanetary struggle. It just makes it even broader than ever before, I think. By the way, your candle burned out.
It did. It did burn out.
How's that happen?
I don't know. I think the batteries ran out.
Oh,
Can I see?
that makes sense.
That is the end of this recording.
There you go. It's lit again.
You just gotta hit it. What about you, Simona?
Simona likes a Cinderella story with Hilary Duff.
So,
You gonna put words in her mouth a little?
I've never seen that, and I have no intention of ever watching that. Well, if we're going to talk nostalgia, I was thinking about the Cinderella with Brandy and Whoopi
Cinderella.
Goldberg.
You mean Whitney Houston?
Yeah, Whitney Houston, sorry. Yes, thank you.
You're
A
welcome.
little different there.
Yeah, yeah. Whitney Houston is the fairy godmother.
Yes.
And Brandy's Cinderella.
No, but Whoopi Goldberg plays the queen.
Does she? It's been years since I've seen that movie.
You see, you're making me... What I love about that is that you have Whoopi Goldberg. I can't remember the white actor's name, and they have an Asian son. So that's what I
Yeah.
loved about the 90s, was that
Yeah.
it did not matter.
Bernadette Peters was the stepmother.
Yes. That's like one of my favorites, because 90s
Yeah.
nostalgia. But Ever After definitely is a really good adaptation, because they take the line that the Cinderella, it wasn't just a fairy tale, that she actually lived.
Existed.
Yeah.
The Ever After will forever be my favorite adaptation of Cinderella, and I think it's like also feeds my history background as well.
Yeah.
Not that I can say with definitive answer if their costumes are historically accurate. I don't know. They look it, so I guess they are. But it's like they're based in a time where, I mean, just the few lines that the French queen says to her son when they make the arrangement of having the ball to choose so that the prince could choose his wife, was that divorce only happens in England, which leads me to believe that they're in the same era of Henry VIII.
And for those of you who don't know, Henry VIII was a man that married many wives.
There's a reason. There's a reason behind it.
There is a reason. He basically wanted to escape the stranglehold of the Catholic Church, and he decided, I want to divorce Catherine of Aragon, marry her lady-in-waiting, whose name I can't remember now.
Anne Boleyn?
Anne Boleyn.
You're really... No. No. Are we really gonna have a history lesson?
No, we're not. But anyway, so he decided, I want to be able to divorce. And so he broke away from the Catholic Church, made the Church of England, and the rest is essentially history.
No.
There-
No. There's another reason for it.
That's a Cliff Notes version.
It's not.
So-
It's not. No. No.
I had to go there because you mentioned the whole divorce in England thing. Did you really think I wasn't going to go there after you said that?
I was hoping that you weren't going to have me explain. Meaning is that Henry VII was the usurper, who was Henry VIII's father, if no one could gather that. He was the usurper. His throne was not for Paul, because I don't know if Paul knows, but his throne was not secure by any means. Henry VIII had two sons, Henry VIII and Arthur. Arthur ends up dying, which then makes Henry VIII king of England. When Henry becomes king, he's got to have an heir. You need an heir in order to continue the line of succession. He only had a daughter, Mary, with Catherine of Aragon. Now, yes, he probably was in love with Anne Boleyn. Yes, Anne Boleyn probably did seduce him out of divorcing Catherine of Aragon. It's what happens, but his ultimate goal, the reason why he was obsessed with needing a son, was because he had no other heirs. And if he failed to produce a son, then the throne would have been up for grabs and a new civil war would have happened, and it would not have been good.
But if you don't care about historical accuracy and you just want a more salacious, tintillating version of historical events, go with what I said before.
No. No. We went off on a tangent here.
But that's fun. I always say Katie should do the history podcast. Talk about costumes and like historical accuracy. But yeah. So
I don't
Ever
know that
After.
anyone would really want to watch that. But
No. Trust me, they would.
I don't know about that.
But yeah, Ever After is a great adaptation. I can't really think of the one with Brandy. Is really good.
Yeah, it's another take on the Roger and Hammerstein's play.
They're singing and dancing in it.
That was then made into a movie in 1969.
There's the one with Lily James from a few years ago.
Oh yeah, Mirror, right? right?
No, it's called Cinderella.
It's
Oh,
yeah,
Mirror Mirror
it's-
Snow White.
Mirror Mirror Snow White Cinderella. That was a really good live action adaptation. Kenneth Branagh, thank you very much for making a very good live action version of the animated Cinderella. I loved it.
I had a friend in college, I mean, I had a friend from college, that after college, moved down to Orlando,
Mm-hmm.
got a job at Disney, and then became Cinderella for
Cool.
a year. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Did you see the secret tunnels?
I don't know. I didn't know to ask.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah,
apparently there's tunnels underneath that,
probably then.
yeah.
Yeah, so that the characters can get to where they need to get to on time.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Oh.
Apparently there are, because I've done research on Walt Disney and Disney World, and
Cool.
I,
At first they told her she wasn't tall enough, but she looks exactly like, or her, she looks exactly like Cinderella. I'll show you that picture.
so, yeah, I really enjoy Ever After. It's my favorite Cinderella adaptation.
So, anyone have any like closing comments?
What's Paul's favorite adaptation? You guys didn't ask
Well,
Paul.
Oh,
we did ask Paul's
you know-
favorite adaptation.
Did you?
Yeah, I asked him
Did he?
first. He said he liked Cinder as his adaptation.
It
but,
is.
Did you say that?
I did
Oh.
actually. I did actually.
yeah.
I mean,
But what about film-wise or animation?
I just watched the Disney ones.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
If nothing else, at least we have fake flowers.
All right. So, producer Lou, have you found the picture?
I'm looking for it.
Or does producer Lou have any questions that he would like to ask?
No.
Any other
I
things
have a
that
lot
don't
of
make
questions,
sense?
but,
Oh, you can just shoot one more at us. It's fun.
No, that's all right.
Are you sure?
I think I understand.
Are you sure? Or are you
I
just
know-
saying that?
I know that I know nothing.
You're like Jon Snow.
Some might say.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
I won't go there. I'll say that for the other podcast. Yeah, so thank you for joining us for another episode. We had a lot of fun. Thank you, Paul,
Yes.
for coming
Oh,
on.
thank you for having
Yes,
me.
thank you, Paul, for coming
Yeah.
on. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for
So,
having me.
we hope that you really enjoyed this episode. We hope that you enjoyed this deep dive and our history tangents.
Oh, I apologize.
We love doing this sort of thing, and we look forward to talking with you again next time. So everyone have a great day.
Yes, bye.
Thank you.